He slapped a black CEO in her own jewelry store. Minutes later, she shut it all down. Hello,
You stole my
everyone.
damn
Before
wallet.
we
Where is
begin
it?
I didn't steal
today's video,
anything.
I need your
Accuse me
help.
again. You're
We've
lying. I
noticed
know
that
you
the
took
channel
it.
is
Shouldn't
losing
be here.
traction, and
I have every right to
subscribing
be
is one of the best
Not
ways
anymore.
you can
Give
help
it back.
us. It's quick, free, and allows
think you can
us
walk away
to
from this?
continue
Try me.
bringing you great
I dare you.
content.
I'm not afraid of you.
You should
Your
be.
support
You're on speaker
means
now.
everything.
You have no idea
Let's
what you're
keep
dealing
this channel
Actually, I
growing
think I do.
collectively. Where are you watching
We have
from?
what you
Drop
need.
your city or country in the comments below.
We're not leaving until we get it.
Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Get your hand off the glass. His voice cracked through the showroom like a whip. Every conversation died instantly. The man in the black suit leaned forward, his fingers stabbing the air, stopping inches from her face.
Close enough to feel his breath.
Close enough to remind her that this wasn't about rules. It was about power. Or at least the kind he thought he had.
She didn't move.
The jewelry store was immaculate polished marble floors, warm light spilling over velvet-lined cases, diamonds resting under glass like they belonged to a quieter world. But now the room felt sharp, charged. Dozens of people stood frozen in a wide semicircle behind him, sales associates and tailored black, well-dressed clients clutching champagne flutes, a few phones already lifted, screens glowing. At the center of it all stood Aisha Monroe. She wore a sleeveless yellow dress, elegant, unbranded, impossible to ignore. One hand rested calmly on the handle of her black leather bag. Her shoulders were squared, her spine straight. Not defensive, not apologetic. Still, "You heard me," the man snapped louder now, performing for the room. "This isn't the place for scenes. And it's definitely not the place for you." A ripple moved through the crowd. A sharp inhale.
Someone shifted their weight. Someone else whispered too quietly to make out.
Aisha's eyes stayed on him. Dark. Focused. Unblinking. She had seen this look before, the clenched jaw, the righteous anger dressed up as authority. Men like him always thought volume made them right. They always mistook silence for surrender. His finger stayed there, hovering, trembling slightly now. Too close. Too familiar. Behind him, a young sales associate stiffened. Another glance toward the security desk and then away, pretending not to see. A woman near the back raised her phone higher, her thumb hovering over record. The man smirked, mistaking the stillness for fear. "Do you know how this works?" he continued. "You don't just walk in here and that's when Aisha finally spoke. Lower your voice. 2 words. Not loud. Not sharp. Measured." The effect was immediate. The room didn't relax, but it shifted, like something heavy had been placed on the scale. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to Aisha Monroe. The man blinked, caught off guard. Then he laughed, a short, humorless sound meant to reassert control. "You don't give orders here," he said, straightening his tie. "You're already on thin ice." Aisha didn't step back. She didn't step forward either. She simply stood there, calm as the diamonds surrounding her, while the room held its breath, unaware that this moment, this single pointed finger, was the last time he would ever feel powerful in this place. Aisha didn't flinch. Not when he laughed. Not when he straightened his tie like the room belonged to him. Not when every pair of eyes quietly recalibrated, measuring her reaction. She simply stood there. The yellow of her dress caught the light again as someone shifted behind the glass cases. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. But it refused to disappear, just like her. The man mistook that stillness for hesitation. "You see," he said to no one in particular, spreading his hand slightly as if teaching a lesson. "This is what happens when people don't understand boundaries. People." The word landed exactly where it was meant to. Aisha's grip tightened just a fraction on the handle of her bag. Not out of fear, out of memory. She had learned a long time ago that stepping back only invited another step forward. That explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you was a losing game. That dignity, once surrendered, was rarely returned.
So she didn't offer credentials?
Didn't raise her voice. Didn't look around for help. She met his eyes again. Calm. Level. Unimpressed. Behind him, the room continued its quiet unraveling. A man in a gray blazer cleared his throat and then thought better of it. A sales associate near the far case folded her hands tightly in front of her knuckles, whitening. Someone near the entrance whispered her name, Aisha, as if testing it, unsure why it felt important. The man noticed none of it. "Security will handle this," he said, nodding once satisfied with his performance. "We run a respectable establishment." Respectable. Aisha let the word sit between them. She thought of another store years ago. Different city. Same marble floors. Same glass cases. Same look on a different man's face when he'd decided she didn't belong. Back then, she'd smiled. Back then, she'd left. "Not today. You're blocking the display," she said evenly. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. The man frowned, thrown off again. "Excuse me," she gestured, small, precise, toward the case between them.
Customers can't see the pieces.
A ripple passed through the crowd. A suppressed sound. Almost a laugh. Almost disbelief. He scoffed. "You're worried about diamonds right now," No Aisha replied. "I'm worried about professionalism." That did it. His face tightened. The air around him changed, less performative now, more personal. He leaned in again, lowering his voice like that made it dangerous. "You don't get to correct me in my own store." Aisha didn't answer right away. She glanced past him just once, taking in the room. The witnesses. The silence. The phones no longer hiding. The people who sensed without yet understanding that something irreversible had already started. Then she looked back at him. "You shouldn't point at people," she said quietly. "It makes you look unsure." The words landed clean, and for the first time since this began, he hesitated just long enough for the balance in the room to shift again ever so slightly in her favor. The pause didn't last long, but it lasted long enough. Long enough for the man to realize the room was no longer echoing him back. Long enough for the silence to feel less like obedience and more like judgment. He straightened, rolling his shoulders as if resetting his authority. "This is getting out of hand," he announced, louder now, reclaiming the volume he trusted. Everyone can go back to what they were doing. No one moved. The jewelry store moments ago, a place of murmured transactions and polite smiles, had transformed into something else entirely. A closed circuit. A held breath. A room waiting for a verdict it didn't yet understand. Aisha remained where she was. Still. Anchored.
Unmoved by the shifting energy that everyone else could feel but didn't know how to name.
Behind the glass cases, a senior sales associate glanced toward the security desk again, this time longer. Her lips parted, then pressed together. She said nothing. She'd learned the cost of speaking up in rooms like this. Near the back, a woman lowered her phone for just a second, her expression tightening. "This is wrong," she whispered to the man beside her. He nodded without looking away. The man in the suit noticed the change and misread it. He mistook discomfort for agreement. "You see," he said, gesturing vaguely to the onlookers. "No one wants a scene. Let's keep this civil." Civil. The word hovered hollow. Aisha shifted her weight slightly, just enough to remind herself she was real, grounded, present. Her heels clicked softly against the marble. The sound carried farther than it should have. "Civility," she said calmly, "usually starts with respect." A murmur moved through the crowd. Someone inhaled sharply. Another phone rose. The man's jaw clenched. He turned his head, scanning the faces behind him, now searching for backup, for confirmation that the room was still his. It wasn't. A young associate near the far wall caught Aisha's eye by accident and froze. For a split second, something passed between them, recognition maybe. Or courage. The associate looked down. The man exhaled through his nose. All right, he said, his tone sharpening. Enough. He took a step to the side, angling his body, no longer just confronting her, but subtly blocking her path toward the center of the store. A territorial move. Small. Intentional. That didn't go unnoticed. Aisha's gaze followed the movement, then lifted back to his face. You don't need to do that, she said. Do what he snapped. Position yourself like that, she replied. I'm not trying to leave. The words landed heavier than she raised them. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He recovered quickly, but not cleanly. Security is on their way, he said. They'll sort this out. Sort it out. Around them, the room leaned in. Whatever this was, it had passed the point of polite correction. It was becoming something else now, something public. Something witnessed. Aisha didn't argue. She didn't protest. She simply nodded once. Good, she said. They should hear this too. And in that moment, as the weight of her certainty settled into the space, the room understood before he did that this was no longer about removing her. It was about what would happen to everyone else next. The word security changed everything. It didn't bring relief. It brought permission. The man squared his stance, shoulders back, now chin lifted. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, the shift from confrontation to enforcement, from opinion to action. You're refusing to comply, he said, his voice adopting a colder, rehearsed edge. That's a problem. Aisha watched him carefully. This was the version of him that believed paperwork and posture could replace decency. The version that hid behind policy once volume stopped working. I haven't refused anything, she replied. Yes, you have, he snapped quickly, too quickly. You've refused to leave. You've refused to identify yourself properly. And you've disrupted business. Disrupted. A few heads turned at that. A woman near the front glanced around as if checking whether she'd missed the disruption. She hadn't. No broken glass. No shouting from Aisha. No scene until he'd created one. You walked in here, the man continued, warming to his narrative, and acted entitled. You don't get to do that. Entitled. There it was. The word carried history with it. Wait. A long shadow that stretched far beyond this showroom. Aisha felt it land not on her chest, but somewhere older. Somewhere she'd learned to protect. I asked you to stop pointing at me, she said evenly. That's not entitlement. He laughed again, sharper this time. Defensive. Don't twist this. You know exactly what I mean. No, she said. I don't think you do. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone shifted closer. Someone else whispered, did he just? The man raised a hand, cutting the air. This store caters to a certain clientele. People who understand how things work. People. Again. Aisha tilted her head slightly. And what kind of people is that? For a split second, he hesitated. It was subtle. A micro pause. The moment where a thought should have stayed unspoken, but didn't quite know how to retreat. People who belong here, he said. The silence that followed was immediate and unforgiving. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the hum of the showroom lighting seemed to dim, as if the space itself had leaned back to take that in. Aisha held his gaze. Say that again, she said quietly. He stiffened. I don't need to. Yes, she replied. You do. A few phones were fully raised now. No hiding it. No pretending. The man glanced around, suddenly aware of the audience he'd underestimated. His voice rose again, grasping for control. You're playing a game? He accused. Trying to provoke something. That won't work here. I'm standing still, Aisha said. You're the only one escalating. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't want this to get ugly. Aisha didn't step back. Then stop making it that way, she said. The accusation hung between them, now fully formed, undeniable. He wasn't just questioning her presence. He was questioning her right to exist in that space. And the room knew it. Every witness, every silence, every held breath. Whatever happened next, there would be no pretending this was just a misunderstanding. The accusation settled into the room like dust after something heavy had been dropped. No one rushed to clean it up. Aisha felt the weight of every eye on her now, not curious anymore, not passive. Measuring, waiting. The kind of attention that didn't ask what's happening, but what happens next. The man mistook that pause for momentum. This doesn't have to turn into something bigger than it is, he said, spreading his hands again, rehearsed calm returning to his voice. You can save yourself the embarrassment. Embarrassment? The word was offered like a favor. Aisha exhaled slowly, not to steady herself, but to slow the room down. She had learned that moments like this moved too fast for people who panicked and too slow for people who performed. The only way through was precision. She looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but with the same quiet focus she reserved for decisions that couldn't be undone. You're confusing me with someone who needs your permission, she said. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It was clean. The effect rippled outward. Someone near the back let out a breath they didn't realize they'd been holding. A woman near the display case nodded once unconsciously, as if something unspoken had finally been said out loud. The man blinked. What did you just say? He asked. Aisha didn't repeat herself. Instead, she adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder, small, deliberate, and took half a step to the side, reclaiming the space he'd tried to block earlier. The movement wasn't confrontational. It was corrective. I came here as a customer, she continued, voice steady. I was treated like a problem. That's on you. He scoffed. You're making assumptions. No, she replied. I'm responding to your behavior. That landed harder than an insult would have. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes flicked briefly toward the crowd, toward the phones, toward the faces that no longer looked neutral. You don't know how this works, he said finally. Aisha tilted her head slightly. Then explain it to me. The challenge wasn't aggressive. It was surgical. Explain it. Out loud. In front of everyone. He didn't. Because explaining it meant naming it, and naming it meant owning it. The silence stretched again, longer this time. Thicker. The kind that exposed cracks instead of hiding them. Aisha felt the shift fully now. Not in him, but in the room. The witnesses were no longer incidental. They were participants. Even the ones saying nothing were choosing sides simply by staying. She let that reality settle before speaking again. You asked me to leave, she said. I declined. That's not a disruption. That's a choice. Her eyes held his. If you want to escalate this, she added calmly, be clear about why. A murmur moved through the crowd, low and unmistakable. The man's jaw tightened. His authority, once loud, once unquestioned, now felt brittle. Conditional! He had wanted control. What he had instead was exposure. And Aisha, standing exactly where she had been all along, had just drawn the line he was afraid to cross. The man didn't answer her. He didn't explain. Didn't clarify. Didn't retreat. Instead, he did what men like him always did when words stopped working. He stepped closer. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just one deliberate stride forward, enough to collapse the space between them. Enough to remind everyone watching that this was no longer a conversation. It was a test. Aisha felt the shift immediately. The air changed. The room tightened. You're done here, he said quietly, his voice low and controlled now. Dangerous in its restraint. I'm not asking again. Behind him, someone gasped. A sharp, involuntary sound. Aisha didn't move. She could feel how close he was now, too close. The heat of his presence. The expectation that she would finally step back, finally yield, finally make this easier for him. She didn't. You should take a step back, she said. It wasn't a plea. It was advice. His jaw flexed. Or what that was the moment. Not the pointing finger. Not the accusation. Not even the threat of security. This. The question asked with confidence he hadn't earned. Aisha met his eyes, unblinking. Or you'll regret how this looks. He laughed under his breath, a short sound meant to humiliate. You think anyone's on your side? He was wrong. He just hadn't noticed yet. Behind him, a young woman near the center display, barely out of training name tag, still stiff, took an unconscious step forward. Her hand trembled at her side.
She didn't raise her voice.
But she didn't look away either. The man reached out then, not grabbing, not striking, but placing his hand flat against the glass case beside Aisha's shoulder, boxing her in. A territorial gesture. Intimate. Unacceptable. Several phones rose at once. That's enough, someone muttered. Louder this time. Aisha felt the weight of the moment settle fully into her bones. She had known this point would come. The instant when silence would no longer protect her, but speaking still could. She lifted her chin slightly. Don't do that, she said. Her voice didn't shake. His smile faded. You don't get to tell me what to do, he replied. The lie in that sentence was enormous. He leaned in again, just a fraction closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. No one will stop me. The room heard it anyway. Not the words, but the intent. Aisha didn't raise her hands. Didn't touch him. Didn't flinch. She simply said clearly now, for everyone take your hand off the case. Silence detonated. A beat passed. Then another. He didn't move. That refusal, small, petty, deliberate, was the breaking point. The young associate found her voice at last.
Sir, she said barely above a whisper. You shouldn't, snapped his head around.
Stay out of this. The damage was done. The room had crossed with her. Aisha felt it not as triumph, not as relief, but as certainty. This was no longer about whether he would stop. It was about what would happen because he didn't. And as security's footsteps finally echoed faintly from somewhere beyond the showroom walls, one truth became unavoidable: he had just crossed the only line that mattered. The room held its breath. Not because anyone spoke, because no one did. Aisha stood exactly where she was, his hand still braced against the glass beside her shoulder, the line already crossed and hanging in the air like a fracture no one could unsee. Phones were up now, openly. No shame, no hiding. And in that suspended moment, her mind went somewhere else. Not far, not gently. Years ago, another city. Another store built of marble and glass and quiet judgment. She had been younger then, tired from a long flight, dressed simply, nothing wrong, nothing loud. She remembered the way the sales associate's smile faded when she stepped inside, the way eyes followed her, not with curiosity, but with calculation. Can she afford this? Does she belong here? She remembered standing at the counter, credit card in hand, while a manager whispered to another employee and glanced at her like she was a wrist. She remembered the pause, too long to be professional, too deliberate to be innocent. Then the words, maybe you should look somewhere else. She had looked around that store the same way she looked around this one now. Same lighting, same velvet displays, same silent agreement from everyone watching. Back then, she had smiled. She had thanked them. She had left. The memory didn't hurt anymore. But it never loosened its grip either. Back in the present, Aisha inhaled slowly, grounding herself in the feel of the marble beneath her heels, the weight of her bag against her side, the quiet certainty of who she was now. The man shifted slightly, sensing the attention closing in. His confidence flickered, not enough to retreat, but enough to harden. "Security's coming," he muttered almost to himself. "This is going to end badly for you." She looked at him. Really looked. And saw what she hadn't bothered naming before. Fear. Not of her, but of losing control of the story he'd been telling himself since the moment she walked in. "Maybe," Aisha said calmly. "But not the way you think." That was all. No explanation. No warning. Just truth delivered without urgency. Behind him, the young associate swallowed hard. A man near the entrance shook his head, slowly, disbelief written across his face. Someone whispered, "This is being recorded not as a threat, but as a fact." The room was no longer waiting for someone to intervene. It was waiting for something to be revealed. Aisha felt it too, that familiar pressure behind the sternum that came right before a decision that couldn't be undone. She had reached this moment before in boardrooms and negotiations and late-night calls that reshaped entire futures. The moment where silence stopped being protection and became preparation. She reached into her bag. Not hurried. Not dramatic. And as her fingers closed around her phone, the past finally loosened its hold. This time, she wasn't leaving. This time, the room would. The phone felt cool in her hand. Not heavy. Not urgent. Familiar. Aisha didn't rush. She didn't glance up at him as she brought it out. That alone unsettled him more than any raised voice could have. People who panicked moved fast. People who knew exactly what they were doing moved like this. "Put that away!" he snapped, irritation edging into his tone. "This isn't going to help you." She ignored him. The screen lit up briefly as her thumb moved one tap, then another. No hesitation. No scrolling. She already knew where she was going. Behind them, the room leaned in. Everyone understood the shift instinctively. This wasn't a plea for help. This wasn't a call to the police. This was something else. Aisha raised the phone to her ear. "Yes," she said calmly before the other person could finish speaking. "It's happening." The man scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Whoever you're calling, they can't change this."
She didn't lower the phone.
Didn't look at him. "Flag the location," she continued, her voice even. "Luxury retail. Main floor. I want everything logged from this moment forward." A pause. Then, yes, including witnesses. His jaw tightened. "You think you're clever," Aisha turned slightly, not to face him fully, but enough to let him hear her clearly. "I think you're being recorded." The words were not a threat. They were a courtesy. Around them, several people stiffened. A woman near the back glanced at her screen, checking her own recording. Someone else lowered their phone slightly, then raised it again more deliberately this time. The man took a step back, then stopped himself. Pride overrode instinct. "You're bluffing," he said. "You walk into my store 'cause of scene, and now you're calling someone to scare me." Aisha listened quietly, eyes unfocused now, not on him, but on the voice in her ear. "Yes," she said after a beat. "He's escalated. Physically."
That landed.
Physically, he snapped. "I didn't touch you."
She looked at his hand, still braced against the glass, still crowding her space. Then back to him.
"Move it," she said. He didn't. Aisha didn't argue. "Proceed," she said into the phone. The room felt smaller now. The walls closer. The silence heavier. A man near the entrance whispered, "Oh no." The man in the suit forced a laugh, but it cracked. "You really think a phone call changes anything?" Aisha lowered the phone slightly, not ending the call just enough to meet his eyes again. "No," she said. "It confirms it." Footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the showroom, closer now. Purposeful security. The man straightened, relief flickering across his face. Good, he muttered. Let them handle it. Aisha slipped the phone back into her hand, calm as ever. They will, she said, but not the way he was expecting. And as the first uniformed figure appeared at the edge of the showroom, one truth became impossible to ignore. This call wasn't the beginning of the end. It was the beginning of the record. Security didn't rush in. They never did. Two uniformed guards appeared at the edge of the showroom, their presence announced not by noise but by the subtle shift of attention.
Conversations didn't resume.
No one exhaled. The room simply made space for them. The man in the suit straightened immediately. Relief flashed across his face, quick, unguarded, before he smoothed it into something that looked like authority. He turned toward them with practiced familiarity. There you are, he said. This woman is refusing to leave and causing a disturbance. Aisha stayed silent. The guards looked from him to her, then back again. They didn't step forward yet. They were trained to assess before acting, and something about this scene made assessment unavoidable. She's been aggressive, the man added too quickly. Disruptive. A murmur rippled through the crowd, soft, disbelieving. Aggressive, a woman near the center shook her head.
She hasn't raised her voice once, she said aloud, surprising herself.
The man shot her a warning look. Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It does now, another voice said. A young associate, the same one who had tried to speak earlier, took a step forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. She didn't start this, she said. You did. The room stilled. The man turned sharply. You're out of line. No, the associate replied quietly. I'm done being in line. That was all it took. The whisper began at the edges, low, quick, contagious. That's her. I recognize her. Wait, that's Aisha. The name moved through the crowd like a current. Not loud. Not announced. Past mouth to ear, glance to glance. A man near the back frowned, pulling out his phone not to record but to search. His eyes widened slightly as whatever he saw confirmed something he hadn't yet said out loud. The guards noticed. One of them shifted his stance, turning more fully toward Aisha now. Ma'am, he said carefully, can you tell us what happened? The man cut in immediately. She's trespassing. Aisha met the guard's eyes. I was shopping, she said calmly, until he decided I didn't belong. The words landed clean. Embellish. Hard to argue with. The second guard glanced at the first. A look passed between them, brief, professional, waited. Behind them, the whisper grew bolder. That's her store. No way. Yes, sir. The man laughed, sharp and brittle. This is ridiculous. She's nobody. The word echoed and died. Aisha didn't react. She didn't need to. The crowd had already started leaning away from him, the invisible line forming without instruction. Phones lowered not because people stopped recording, but because they didn't need to anymore. The truth was moving faster than any camera. And as the guards hesitated, no longer sure who they were, here to remove the man felt it too. The shift. The moment when control slipped, not with a bang, but with a whisper. And he was standing on the wrong side of it. The whisper didn't stop. It crystallized. One of the guards cleared his throat. Sir, he said to the man in the suit, we need to understand exactly what's going on here. The man waved a dismissive hand. It's simple. She's causing a scene. She won't leave when asked. The guard didn't move. Asked by whom, he pressed. The question landed harder than it should have. The man hesitated just long enough to expose the crack. By me. I manage this location. Aisha lifted her phone again, not to her ear this time, but so the screen faced outward. Not dramatically. Not high. Just enough. I didn't refuse to leave, she said. I refused to be removed without cause. Her voice was steady, measured, and there is no cause, she continued, except that he decided I didn't belong. The guard nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. Ma'am, can I have your name? She didn't look at the man when she answered. Aisha Monroe. The name hit the room like a dropped glass. It wasn't loud. It didn't shatter, but everyone felt it. The man's face drained of color. That's, he started, then stopped himself. That doesn't mean anything. A woman near the front laughed softly, not mocking, amazed. It means everything. The second guard glanced at his tablet fingers moving quickly. He froze. Then he looked up. Sir, he said to the man, are you aware who she is? The man's confidence collapsed in real time. She's lying, he snapped. Anyone can say a name. Aisha finally turned to face him fully. You pointed at me, she said quietly. In the store I founded. Silence. Pure. Absolute. Someone near the back whispered, oh my God. The guard's voice dropped respectful now. Ms. Monroe, this is your company. Aisha nodded once. I own the brand, she said. This store. Every case. Every piece of glass you touched. The man staggered back half a step. No, he breathed. That's not possible. Aisha didn't raise her voice. You mistook my silence for permission, she said. That was your last mistake. No one moved. No one spoke. The reveal didn't explode. It settled. And in that stillness, the balance of power didn't just shift, it inverted. No one spoke at first. They didn't need to. The truth had landed heavy and final, and the room adjusted around it the way water adjusts around a stone. The guard straightened, not abruptly, not theatrically, but with a precision that marked a shift in allegiance. One of them stepped half a pace closer to Aisha, not to restrain her, but to stand beside her. The man in the suit noticed. His mouth opened, then closed. The authority he'd worn so comfortably minutes ago no longer fit. It hung loose, slipping with every breath. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. I didn't know who she was. Aisha turned her head slightly, just enough to acknowledge him. That's the problem, she said. You didn't need to. The words cut deeper than accusation ever could. The guard nearest the man spoke again, his tone firm now. Sir, we're going to need you to step away from her. What the man snapped. No, this is my store. The guard didn't raise his voice. Not anymore. A low sound moved through the crowd. Not laughter. Not applause. Recognition. The second guard glanced at his tablet again, then nodded once. Corporate has already flagged this location, he said quietly. We've been instructed to secure the situation. Secure? The man's face twisted. Instructed by who, Aisha answered before the guard could. By me. She didn't say it with satisfaction. She didn't say it with anger. She said it the way people stated facts that could no longer be debated. The man shook his head, backing away now. You can't do this. I've worked here for years. You've represented this brand for years, Aisha corrected. That's why this matters. She turned slightly, addressing the room without raising her voice. Everyone here witnessed what happened, she said. This isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. The guards moved, then smooth professional positioning themselves between the man and the center of the showroom. Sir One said, please come with us. The man looked around wildly, searching for support that no longer existed. Faces that had once deferred to him now watched in silence. A few didn't hide their relief. This is unbelievable, he muttered as he was escorted away. I was just doing my job.
Aisha didn't respond.
As he passed the glass cases, his reflection fractured split across diamonds and polished surfaces that no longer belonged to him. When the doors closed behind him, the sound was soft, but it echoed. The room exhaled as one, not in celebration, in release. Aisha remained where she was for a moment longer, steady, composed, then turned toward the people who remained. "This store stays open," she said calmly, "but the standard changes today." No one argued. No one needed convincing. Justice hadn't arrived loudly. It had arrived clean, and everyone in that room knew they had just witnessed something irreversible. The showroom didn't return to normal. It couldn't. People shifted, whispered, checked their phones, but the air had changed too completely to pretend nothing had happened. The lights were the same. The diamonds still glinted behind glass. Yet the space now carried a different weight, like a room after a verdict has been read. Aisha stood quietly at the center of it. She didn't smile, didn't celebrate, didn't look for validation. She simply waited until the last echo of movement faded. Then she spoke. "This store was built to represent excellence," she said, her voice steady and unforced. "Not intimidation, not assumptions, not silence when something is wrong." Every word landed without resistance. She turned slightly toward the sales associates, many of whom had avoided her eyes earlier.
Standards aren't about who you serve, she continued.
They're about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. A few heads lowered, not in shame, but in understanding. Aisha adjusted the strap of her bag, the same small, deliberate motion she'd made when this began. It felt different now. Lighter. "I didn't raise my voice today," she said. "I didn't have to." She paused, not for effect, but to let the room catch up. "I raised the standard." Silence followed. Then, not applause. Not cheers. Respect. A man near the back nodded slowly. A woman exhaled, eyes shining. The young associate, who had spoken up earlier, stood a little straighter than before. Aisha turned toward the exit, her heels clicking softly against the marble. Each step was unhurried, intentional. At the doorway, she stopped and glanced back one last time. "Remember this moment?" she said. "Not because of who I am, but because of who you choose to be when I'm not here." She left. The doors closed behind her without ceremony. Inside, the showroom remained still for a beat longer, then began carefully to move forward. Conversations resumed in quieter tones. Phones were lowered. People returned to the cases, but something in their posture had shifted. They had witnessed more than a confrontation. They had seen power exercised without cruelty, authority without noise, justice without spectacle. And long after the diamonds were locked away and the lights dimmed for the night, one truth lingered in that space: clear, unavoidable, permanent dignity doesn't need permission. It only needs someone brave enough to stand still.